I didn't think much of it the first time someone took my parking spot, but by the third day, I realized something was off, and by the end of that month, I'd figured out a way to make sure no one ever took it again, without ever breaking a single rule. See, I live on this tight little block in a neighborhood just outside downtown. Old row houses, narrow sidewalks, and not nearly enough parking for the number of people who've moved in over the years. You learn pretty quickly that street parking isn't yours. It's more like a game of musical chairs that never really ends. Still, there are unspoken understandings. People tend to stick close to their homes. You recognize the usual cars. There's a rhythm to it. And right in front of my place, just slightly to the left of my gate, there's this one spot. Not reserved, not marked, nothing official about it. But it's the most convenient place for me to park. Close enough to carry groceries without feeling like I'm hiking. Far enough from the corner that you're not dealing with traffic cutting too tight. For years, it kind of just worked out. I didn't claim it. I didn't need to. It was just there, and more often than not, it was open when I got home. Until one Tuesday evening, I pulled up and saw a gray sedan sitting in it. Nothing unusual, right? I figured someone had a guest over, maybe a quick visit. I parked half a block down, grabbed my bag, didn't think twice about it. That's just city living. But the next morning, I stepped outside with my coffee, and that same gray sedan was still there. Same angle, same spot, like it hadn't moved an inch. Now that caught my attention, just a little. Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe someone was staying overnight. It happens. That evening when I came back from work, though, yeah, you can probably guess, it was still there. And that's when something in my head clicked. Not in a big dramatic way, just a quiet little shift. Like, okay, this might not be random. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I normally wouldn't. The car would be gone early in the morning, like, before I even stepped outside, and then it would show up again in the evening, almost like clockwork. Not every single day, but most weekdays. Weekends, not so much. That's when I realized whoever owned that car wasn't visiting. They were using the spot. And once you see a pattern like that, you can't really unsee it. I started paying more attention, not in a creepy way, just observant. Like, I'd glance out the window when I heard an engine, or notice headlights pulling in while I was making dinner. It became part of my routine without me even meaning it to. And the thing is, I wasn't even mad at first. Annoyed? Sure. But I understood the rules. Street parking is public. Nobody owes me that space just because it's in front of my house. If anything, I've benefited from that same system plenty of times. Still, there's a difference between something being legal and something being considerate. And that difference started showing up in small, irritating ways. My gate. See, it swings outward toward the sidewalk, not inward. It's one of those older designs, probably from the 70s, and it needs a bit of clearance to open all the way. Most people on the block know that. They leave just enough space without thinking about it. But this gray sedan, whoever was driving it liked to squeeze in as tight as possible. Not enough to completely block the gate, just enough to make everything slightly more difficult. The first time it really got to me was on a Thursday morning. Trash day. I rolled the bin out like I always do, swung the gate open, and it stopped halfway, nudging right up against the front bumper of that car. I stood there for a second, hands still on the handle, just staring at it, like maybe it would move if I waited long enough. It didn't. So I had to turn the bin sideways, angle it through the gap, kind of shimmy it out onto the curb like I was solving a puzzle I didn't sign up for. Not the end of the world, but not exactly smooth either. Then a couple days later, I had a grocery delivery. Nothing fancy, just a few bags. The driver walks up, tries to open the gate, and pauses. "Hey man," he calls out. "This thing doesn't open all the way." I step out, take a look, and sure enough, same problem. We ended up passing the bags through the gap, one at a time, both of us kind of awkwardly laughing about it. But inside, I could feel that little irritation starting to settle in deeper. Because once, fine. Twice, still manageable. But when it keeps happening, it starts to feel like something else. Like your space, your daily flow, is being chipped away, little by little. And I tried to ignore it, I really did. I told myself, don't be that guy. Don't turn into someone who complains about parking on a public street. That's not who you want to be. But then came the morning that tipped it. I was running late, already behind schedule, and as I swung the gate open to get out, same story. Halfway. Stopped. That gray sedan, parked just a few inches too close. And for the first time, I didn't just feel annoyed. I felt disrupted, like something that should have been simple wasn't anymore. And that's a different kind of frustration. That's the kind that sticks with you. So I stood there for a second, looking at that car, then back at my gate, and I remember thinking, okay, this isn't just about a parking spot anymore. Something's going to have to change. And I had no idea yet just how far I was willing to take it. So yeah, that morning kind of stayed with me. Not in a dramatic, slam the door kind of way, more like a quiet itch in the back of my mind that wouldn't go away. The kind that shows up again later when you're doing something completely unrelated, washing dishes, tying your shoes, and suddenly you're thinking about a parked car like it personally offended you. I went to work, tried to shake it off, told myself I was overreacting, but by the time I got home that evening and saw that same gray sedan sitting there again, same angle, same tight squeeze against my gate, I knew I couldn't just ignore it anymore. Now, I'm not confrontational by nature. I'm the kind of person who will move my own car before I ask someone else to move theirs. I'll adjust, I'll adapt. I'll inconvenience myself just to keep things smooth. But there's a point where being easygoing starts to feel like being invisible. And I think I hit that point right there on the sidewalk, staring at that car. As luck would have it, or maybe not luck, I heard the soft click of a car door behind me. I turned, and there he was. Mid-30s, maybe. Clean cut, button-down shirt, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He looked like he'd just stepped out of one of those co-working offices, focused, a little rushed, already halfway into his next task. He glanced at me, then at the car, then back at me again like he was doing the math in real time. That yours? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Yeah, he said, casual, already pulling his keys out. Why? I walked over to the gate, pushed it open until it hit his bumper with a soft tap. It doesn't clear, I said. Not when you park this close. He looked at it for a second, not defensive, not apologetic, just assessing. Yeah, I mean it's street parking, he shrugged. I'm not blocking it. And that right there, that sentence, it was technically correct, which somehow made it more frustrating. I get that, I said, nodding. I'm not saying you can't park here. I'm just asking for a little space so the gate can open properly. He shifted his weight, glanced down the street like he was already calculating alternatives. Look, man, he said, not unkindly, but definitely not budging. It's first come, first serve. If I leave more room, someone else just takes it anyway. There it was. Not rude, not aggressive, just indifferent. And in a weird way, that made it harder to argue with. Because he wasn't wrong. He got in his car, backed out smoothly, gave me a small nod like the conversation was over, and drove off. I stood there for a second, watching him disappear down the block, then looked back at the empty spot in front of my house. And I remember thinking, this isn't about him. Not really. He's just playing the system the way it's set up. Which meant, if I wanted anything to change, I had to stop thinking about the person and start thinking about the system. That thought stuck with me. That night, instead of zoning out in front of the TV like I usually do, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, typing in things I never thought I'd care about: city parking regulations, residential access rules, curb markings. I wasn't looking for a loophole. I was looking for clarity. Because there's a difference. One is about bending rules. The other is about understanding them well enough to use them properly. And somewhere between a PDF from the city website and a forum thread from a few years back, I found something interesting. It wasn't a reserved parking permit, nothing like that. It was called an access protection marking. Basically, if you had a driveway or a gate that required clearance and parked vehicles were consistently interfering with that access, you could request that the city mark a section of the curb as no parking. Not the whole space, just enough to keep things functional. It wouldn't give me ownership. It wouldn't guarantee I'd always have a spot, but it would protect the one thing I actually needed: access. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt something shift. Not frustration, not annoyance, control. The process itself was surprisingly simple. Fill out a request form, pay a small fee, upload a basic diagram showing how the gate opens and how much space it needs. That was it. No confrontation, no back and forth, just procedure. I sketched out my gate on a piece of paper, nothing fancy, just a rough drawing with arrows showing the swing radius. Took a picture of it, uploaded everything, and hit submit. And then, I let it go. Or at least, I tried to. The next couple of weeks went by like nothing had changed, and in a way, nothing had. The gray sedan kept coming back. Sometimes it parked a little farther, sometimes a little closer, but never quite enough. And every time I had to angle my way through that gate, I'd feel that same quiet reminder: this is temporary. Something's already in motion. I didn't know when it would happen, or if it even would, but I knew I'd done what I could without turning it into something bigger than it needed to be. And that mattered to me. Then one morning, earlier than usual, I woke up to a sound I didn't recognize. Not loud, but different. A low hum of engines, the clatter of metal, voices echoing faintly outside. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee still in hand, and there it was. 2 city trucks parked along the curb. Bright orange cones lined up in a neat row, and a couple of workers in reflective vests measuring out the exact space right in front of my gate. I just stood there for a second, watching them, not saying anything. One of them glanced up at me, gave a quick nod like this was just another job on their list. Which, for them, it was. But for me, this was the turning point. They worked quickly, measured, marked, and then, with a steady hand, one of them started painting a clean, bright line along the curb, just a short section, maybe a few feet, but perfectly placed. Right where the problem had always been. Not the whole spot, not even most of it, just enough. Enough to make a difference. Enough to draw a boundary that didn't exist before. And as the paint dried in the morning sun, something about the whole scene felt official. Final. Like the rules hadn't changed, but the way they were applied had. By the time they packed up and drove off, the street looked almost the same. Almost. But that small stretch of fresh paint, it changed everything. That evening, when I got home, the gray sedan was nowhere to be seen. In fact, no one had parked in that tight little gap at all. Cars still lined the street, just not right up against my gate. I walked up, pushed it open, and for the first time in weeks, it swung all the way out. Smooth. Effortless. No resistance. And I won't lie, I stood there for a second longer than necessary, just holding it open, letting that feeling sink in. Not victory exactly, but something close. Something quieter. Like balance had been restored. I thought that would be the end of it. No drama, no aftermath, just a small fix to a small problem. But a few days later, just as things were settling into a new rhythm, there was a knock on my door. Not loud, not aggressive, just deliberate. And for some reason, the moment I heard it, I had a feeling this story wasn't quite over yet. I remember that knock more clearly than anything else in this whole situation. Not because it was loud or aggressive, but because of the timing. Things had just settled. The street had found a new rhythm. My gate opened clean every single time. The problem, as far as I was concerned, had been solved, quietly, cleanly, without turning into some neighborhood feud. So when I opened the door, part of me already knew. This wasn't just a casual hello. The guy standing there wasn't the same one I'd spoken to earlier, not the gray sedan driver. This one was a little older, maybe early 40s, dressed sharper, blazer, clean sneakers, that kind of in-between style that says you work somewhere modern but still want to look put together. He had this polite, practiced smile, the kind people use when they're about to bring up something uncomfortable but want to keep it civil. "Hey," he said, offering a small nod. "You live here, right?" "Yeah," I said. "What's up?" He glanced briefly toward the curb, then back at me. "Quick question. Were you the one who requested the new curb marking?" There it was. No accusation in his voice. No edge. Just direct. I didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I was." He paused for half a second. Not surprised. More like confirming something he already suspected. "Got it," he said, shifting his stance slightly. "I work over at the co-working space on the corner. Redwood Collective." And just like that, everything connected a little more clearly. "Okay," I said, leaning lightly against the doorframe. "Yeah, I figured it had something to do with that." He gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "Yeah, parking's been getting a little rough for us lately. A lot of people were using this block, especially that stretch right there." He gestured toward the curb, toward what used to be the tight squeeze next to my gate. "And now with the marking, it's just made things a bit tighter." There was a moment of silence after that. Not tense, but definitely loaded. And I could feel the shape of the conversation forming before either of us said anything else. He wasn't there to argue, but he also wasn't there by accident. "I get that," I said. "I really do." And I meant it, because I'd seen it. The flow of people in and out of that place, laptops under their arms, coffee in hand, moving fast, trying to make their day work just like anyone else. But I also knew what the last few weeks had been like on my end. I didn't ask for a private spot. I added, keeping my voice even. I just needed enough room to open my gate properly. That's it. He watched me for a second, like he was weighing something. Not my words, but the intent behind them. Yeah, he said slowly. That's fair. And there it was. No pushback. No attempt to negotiate it down or turn it into something else. Just acknowledgement. But the conversation didn't end right away. He looked back at the street again, then back at me. Can I ask you something, though? Sure. Before this, was it really that bad? Now that question, that one had layers. Because it wasn't just about inconvenience. It was about perspective. About whether what I did felt justified from the outside looking in. I let out a small breath, thinking about it, not rushing the answer. It wasn't terrible, I said. But it wasn't nothing either. He nodded slightly, encouraging me to continue. It's like everything still worked, I went on, but just a little worse than it should have. The gate didn't open all the way. Deliveries got awkward. Trash day turned into a whole thing. I glanced past him, toward that freshly painted curb. And it kept happening. Same pattern, over and over. At some point, it stops feeling random and starts feeling like your space doesn't quite belong to you anymore. Even if, technically, it never did. He didn't interrupt. Didn't argue. Just listened. And I could see it landing. Not dramatically, not like some big realization, but enough. Yeah, he said after a moment. I can see that. Another pause. Then he gave a small nod, more to himself than to me. All right, he said. I appreciate you explaining it. And just like that, the tension I'd been expecting never actually showed up. No raised voices. No passive-aggressive comments. Just a conversation that ended exactly where it needed to. He thanked me, turned, and walked back down the path toward the corner, blending into the same flow of people I'd been watching for weeks. I closed the door, stood there for a second, and honestly, I wasn't sure how to feel. Relieved, maybe, but also a little surprised. Because I'd braced myself for conflict, and instead got understanding. And sometimes, that feels stranger. Over the next week or so, something else started to shift. Not immediately, not all at once, but gradually. Fewer unfamiliar cars on the block. More open spaces, even during the usual peak hours. At first, I thought maybe it was just a coincidence. People taking time off, schedules changing. But then one afternoon, I ran into a guy I recognized from the co-working space. Not the one who came to my door, but someone I'd seen getting out of different cars over the past few weeks. We ended up walking the same direction for a bit, and he mentioned it casually. Yeah, they worked something out with a garage a couple streets over, he said. Discounted rates for members. Way easier than circling the block all day. I nodded, trying not to make it obvious that I was connecting the dots in real time. No kidding, I said. That's good. Yeah, he shrugged. Honestly, should have done it sooner. And that was it. No mention of complaints. No hint that my curb marking had triggered anything. Just a solution that made sense for everyone. By the time another week passed, the gray sedan was completely gone. Not moved to a different spot. Not coming back at different hours. Just gone. Like it had never been part of the routine in the first place. And the street, it felt different. Not quieter, not emptier, just more balanced. Like everyone had adjusted, just enough, to make things work again. Now here's the part one keep coming back to. I didn't win anything. I didn't claim a spot. I didn't push anyone out. All I did was draw a line where one probably should have been all along. And somehow, that small change shifted everything around it. No tickets. No arguments. No late-night notes left on windshields. Just a system correcting itself once someone finally used it the way it was meant to be used. But every time I tell this story, someone inevitably says the same thing. That was kind of a power move. Or, you basically forced them out. And I get why it looks that way. From the outside, it might seem like I took a public space and carved out a piece of it for myself. But that's not how it felt from where I was standing. It felt like I stopped shrinking around a problem and addressed it in the one way that didn't turn it into something ugly. Still, I'm curious where you land on it. Was it fair? Was it selfish? Or was it just practical? Because in a place where everything's shared and nothing's guaranteed, sometimes the line between those things isn't as clear as we think. So yeah, that's my story. And I'd honestly love to hear what you think. If you were in my position, would you have done the same thing, or just let it go?